Hello, YouTube audience. This is a postscript on my Asperger series. My appeal to Autism Speaks, I intended to make a conclusion. This, I'm really going to make a postscript because I think, I don't want to bog my regular audience down in this subject too much. But I am an adult on the spectrum. I stated such in my previous videos. I have many of the mannerisms of an adult on the spectrum. I have some of the same issues as an adult on the spectrum, and I have, frankly, both many of the same abilities and perhaps many of the same disabilities as an adult on the spectrum. I am putting this postscript out there as an appeal to policymakers and specifically as an appeal to employers who might be dealing with adults on the spectrum. In particular, wherever adults might be on the spectrum, be they verbal, nonverbal, be they seemingly high functioning, quote unquote, or be perhaps not so, quote, high functioning, quote unquote, whatever these terms mean. My appeal to you is this. If you are an employer watching this, I'm going to beg you and plead with you to find out as much about Asperger as you can and much about forms of autism as you can, not to necessarily believe anything that any of your previous prior perceptions, that necessarily somebody walking through your door who's autistic or has Asperger may not be. You might assume they may not be qualified for the job. You might assume that they may not be competent. But that assumption is based very much on ideas in the culture, ideas in the zeitgeist that do not necessarily measure up to actual verifiable fact. And so my appeal to employers who would be considering candidates with autism and Asperger's, for one thing, remember that at least in the United States there are disability laws. And I would hope that other Western democracies have similar laws. And frankly, I would hope every country would have such laws. Remember also that there may be a unique set of talents and skills that a job applicant with Asperger has that could be a benefit to your company or your organization. And remember, thirdly, that every action that we do contributes to society in some way. And if one makes a decision on the basis of, well, yeah, I believe in equal access for all, but I've got a business to run or I've got a company to run and I can't take any chances, the problem is if the other guy's thinking the same thing, it creates a culture and a climate of discrimination. And a culture and climate of discrimination is often fed by fear. If you are afraid of a certain group of people, if you believe that they, quote, lack empathy, end quote, which is a big myth. It's a very big myth about Asperger and autism that people who are on the spectrum lack empathy. But if you believe that, in fact, the actual data suggests something far more complicated, that, in fact, people on the spectrum can be overwhelmed by emotional input from the world. And so the seeming lacking of empathy is more of a disassociative response. But it really, if anything, there's often an increased empathy and an increased compassion. It's just difficult to know how to apply that on the basis of knowing other people's visual cues and that type of thing. Again, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm quoting it on the basis of my understanding of that. But really, if you make a decision just based on something you grew up believing, that people who are on the spectrum must of necessity have cognitive deficits, or people growing up on the spectrum must of necessity be unable to socialize or unable to be compassionate or anything like that. If you believe things just because you were told them, you're not being a very good citizen yourself. In fact, you're not really being very empathetic yourself. You are manifesting the very qualities that you are then accusing others of having. You are manifesting a lack of social skills yourself and you are manifesting a lack of forward thinking. And so to employers and to people who are policymakers, both, I say, educate yourself as to what the spectrum is in its full complexity. Visit sites like Aspies for Freedom. Um, Visit sites pertaining that deal with neurodiversity. And last but certainly not least, be willing to take a chance that somebody who has qualifications and yet might be socially a little bit different can be an asset to your organization. Really, who wants to work in a workplace where everybody conforms? I mean, ultimately, in the final analysis, this sounds it's one of these overused ideas, but it's true. The strength of any organization, of any country, of any society is in its diversity. The strength of a free society is in its diversity. I mean, real diversity, not just diversity of how people look or language or anything like that, but also diversity of who they are, what their interests are, whether they do or don't enjoy football, whether they do or don't enjoy more solitary pursuits. Not everybody has to show up to the company picnic and stay for a long time in order to be a good company member. Maybe they can show up for a few minutes, say hello to everybody, and then go off and visit the train museum. I mean, that's as long as they know to be friendly and sociable, as long as they manifest, as long as they're able to do the job and respect their fellow employees enough, that should be enough. Because if you create any situation where everybody has to conform, what you then have is you have the very group think that ruined Enron. You have the very group think that, if anything, has ruined our society more than it's contributed to it. So value the insights of people who are on the spectrum. If they may have an insight that you don't have, or that might be unique very much to them. So, in summation, not to bore you with an endless video, please, for goodness sakes, if you are an employer and you have somebody who's on the spectrum, I'm not saying hire them on the spot. You don't know that, but what I would say is at least consider their application from all possible standpoints. Thank you.